experience as you kind of go through the rest of your program, which is, I think, almost a month. So very quickly, first about myself. Why am I here? First of all, I'm really excited to be here. I generally speak fast. Today I'll be speaking even faster because I'm very excited. And I do not have, and I don't have an American accent. So in case you don't follow me, please interrupt. Not only for interrupting me for my accent, but in case you have a question, you can't hold on to it, it causes a stomach upset, just let it out. Right?
Talking of stomach upsets and Indian accent, there's a video that we watched yesterday, which all of them seem to have followed. So I think they'll follow your accent well.
Wonderful. Again, so how I would like to run this session is, I have approximately 1 hour 15 minutes, and it could be as boring as you want it. Right? So if you allow me to talk continuously, it's going to be boring, it's going to be one-way download. So interrupt me as often as possible, as in when you have a question, something you think is something that you don't agree to, or you have experienced slightly differently than what I'm talking about, please interrupt. Please challenge as well, if you think that's not what kind of goes well with your thinking, right? I am representing, although I'm not kind of in the capacity of the role, whatever I hold for Swiss Re, I'm not here because of that, but still, I work for Swiss Re, and whatever I say is in a way shaped by Swiss Re and its interest in the market, right? So, I have few slides, but only to kind of keep your attention, right? Breakfast was good, I know, so you feel slightly sleepy, coffee breaks, whenever you want to take a coffee break, go ahead and grab your coffee. Right? So I have a few slides, maybe 9 or 10 of them, only to hold on to your attention. Otherwise, I don't have a fixed agenda. And neither am I going to give you a full course meal, rather a flavor only. A few things that I will touch upon, and that's why I listed down here. Reinsurance, I'll be talking about the art and science of catastrophe models. Many people actually call them catastrophic models. They are not catastrophic models, they are catastrophe model. I'm sure your command of English is much better than an average Indian. So many Indians, we call it catastrophic models. No, they are not catastrophic models. They are catastrophe models. They do not predict catastrophe. They actually predict the losses. Again, we are reinsurer, so we are interested in the losses. We are interested in the economics of it, right? So these models are meant to predict or calculate the losses that could come from a catastrophe event or even a catastrophic event. I'll be talking about something called the 4-box principle. That's how we think a catastrophe model can be formed, can be built. I'll be talking about, very briefly, about climate change, because climate change, again, we as a reinsurer see it as an opportunity. We think we should propagate this as a social cause as well, but I will be talking about the economics of climate change. And there's a famous study that we have done in collaboration with Rockefeller Foundation. It's available on our website, and other sources also you can find it. It's called the ECA. So I'll probably spend one slide on ECA. It stands for Economics of Climate Adaptation. Then obviously, I am representing Swiss Re, so I'll be talking about my company, the great work that we do for the industry, for the society, human beings in general, and at some point of time, you should consider working for Swiss Re. As I said, we have an office in Aarhus as well. Our headquarters is in Zurich, and we have an exciting office in an exotic location called Miami. That's the most recent addition to our list of offices. We have 2 offices in India. One is in Mumbai, that's where I work, and last 4.5 years I was in the Bangalore office. I'm sure you guys are planning for a visit to that office as well.
So one question on that, Northeast has a very strong co-op program, probably the best in that country. Does Swiss Re entertain interns, undergraduate interns?
Yes, so we have a full-fledged internship program, and most often it leads to permanent employment. We have a graduate program. It's a bit of a misnomer because most often it's actually PhDs who get into that graduate program. The eligibility criteria is a bachelor's degree and less than 3 years of experience. That's our graduate program, and at any point of time you can consider a full-time employment. Even a graduate program is a full-time employment, but first 18 months you are on a probation, on a strict diet, wherein you are fed a lot of things in a way to kind of orient you to the reinsurance world as well as to Swiss Re. So graduate program is probably our most coveted program. People on that program are on an accelerated career path. and all of them are doing exceptionally well in the organization. So do look out for the graduate program. So our website is www.swissstreet.com. All the information, email ID, brochures, everything you will find. Right? And then finally, what's on your mind is the most important agenda. So at the end, if you're left confused, I think I would have done my job. Right? Because I definitely cannot give you enough in 1.5 hours. So if I leave you with a lot of questions, some of it probably I'll be able to answer. I leave you with a lot of questions, with a lot of hunger, so that you at least go to my company's website, look for more information, not only job. So that's the idea, that's what I've tried to achieve.
One of us can operate the tablet for you.
It's the image is slightly blurry. It's one of our basic publication on reinsurance. Again, available as an iPad app as well. It's quite interactive. iPad app is available. I think it's free to download. You can download it and play and learn what is reinsurance. So I'll keep it very brief. When we insure the portfolio of an insurance company, it's called reinsurance. So imagine, I think it's very easy for you to understand. In US, cars are insured, homes are insured, you buy life or health insurance. And for even your commercial property, commercial operations, you buy various other kinds of insurance. And that is typically sold by an insurance company. So for example, Allstate would be selling a homeowners policy. I don't know if Allstate is selling homeowners policy anymore. They do, right?
I think so.
Okay. But at least motor. Allstate or Gecko, they sell you motor insurance. So they would be selling a lot of these insurance policies. And over a period of time, they will form a portfolio. So imagine a new company issuing new policies, getting on more risk on their book, and they would form a portfolio of, let's say, cars. Now, they could think that they have issued a lot of policies, a lot of insurance cover to individual car owners, but collectively, they might be thinking that they are sitting on a big risk, right? And that is the time they would think of reinsurance. But that is not the only time they think of reinsurance. They could think of reinsurance as releasing capacity as well. So they would have deployed some money, marketing costs, administration costs, plus I think most important cost in insurance is reserves. So you need to keep, as an insurance company, you need to keep a reserve so that in case there is a loss, you are in a position to pay. And yes, a big portion of it will come from the premiums that you are earning on your, let's say, car policies that you have sold. And you would assume that there would be no losses, right? Or even if there are losses, there would be fleet losses once in a while. Not every car owner who has bought an insurance policy from your company would suffer a damage and then put a claim on it. But there is a possible scenario wherein that can happen. Any guesses when that can happen, that there is a large number of claims from car owners?
After a natural disaster?
Wonderful. Okay, if we could illustrate a little bit further, what kind of natural disasters?
Like if there were a tsunami or a flood or maybe even a tornado or...
Yes, maybe some local experience, tornadoes,
Yeah.
yes, in the Midwest, right, or maybe hails, right. A large number of cars could be heavily damaged, windshields, big dents on the cars, right. Yes. So for those circumstances, insurance company would go for another big insurance cover, which is called reinsurance. So that's very simply put, that's how I would describe reinsurance. Reinsurance exists in all possible lines, not just for catastrophe business, but even for life and health business. So companies writing life or health policies, even they do buy reinsurance. So they do go up to a reinsurer, please.
So one question I had is, so we go to insurance go to reinsurance, and as the catastrophe gets larger, some people have been saying that because of climate change, the more intense weather extremes, at least some of them could get even more intense. So there is a reinsurance that will be needed?
Yes, and there exists a term for that. It's called retrocession. So that's more of a sideway play, right? Another reinsurer sits next to you and you transfer some of or what we call in our world ceding the risk. We earn the premium and the insured cedes the risk to the insurance company cedes the risk to a reinsurance company could retrocede it to another reinsurance company, which is called a retrocessionaire. Please.
So why don't the primary insurers just do that to begin with? Why don't they insure each other the way reinsurance insures each other?
Okay, you're already thinking, yes, it does exist. So there are fundamentally a concept of, and that's very common in your country, in US. I'm assuming that you are from US. So you have these mutual insurance companies, right? That's how it works, pooling of risk. But that's not necessarily one insurance company and another insurance company, but more as insureds, they come together to form a mutual. Because again, within a mutual, let's say 10 of us, if we have a car, each one of us have a car, or 2 cars, right? Not all of us would bump into somebody or bump to a lamp post and have a damage, right? So within that also we can pay for our losses, right? So that's the idea of mutual. So that's at a very fundamental level. And what you said is called co-insurance. So that exists. For large risk, co-insurance is very common. Right? It's not insured by just one company, but multiple insurance companies who are sitting parallelly to each other. So their liability is just next to each other. It is not in any particular order. But in reinsurance, the liability, first it is, how does a deductible work? Have you heard of that word? Anyone has a car policy? Anyone? Sorry, you had a question. You want to...
Oh, do you want me to ask the question?
Oh, sorry, I thought you raised your hand.
Oh, I had my hand raised to ask a question.
Or before that, if you
Okay,
have
yeah. I was just wanting to know, do reinsurance companies kind of make money in the same way that normal insurance companies do? Just they get payments from insurance companies rather than customers?
I get well paid. I work for...
No, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. I was just.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Reinsurance companies, yes, we do make money. And how do we make money? Again, think of it. Why do you buy insurance? Because you perceive that there is a risk. In case it comes true, the financial losses that you will incur, you want somebody else to take care of it. And for that, you pay a small premium, maybe an annual premium, right? And it works in a very similar way for reinsurer also. The only difference is in aggregation, right? An insurance company will aggregate all these risks, right? But when an insurance company is issuing one policy, they should, but they do not care much for their aggregation. They think it's one policy, whatever is the quality of the risk, I get premium, and in case there's a loss, I pay for it, right? So they would like to write more and more policies. We'll talk about that, and I've not forgotten that I've given you a task. I hope you remember what was the task last time. At least the name of the law, I hope you remember. Law of? Yes, law of large numbers.
They have been through a lot of sessions.
I can imagine. But this is something fundamental, and don't take it in a very derogatory manner. In plus 2, that is your final 2 years of schooling in India, Indian students would learn what is law of large numbers. But most of them, even then, they don't remember. And I have to tell you this: you might have been very inspired with some of the folks that you met at IIT Mumbai, right? I think yesterday you had a session with them, or some kind of interaction. Multiple sessions. So right. So I was kind of for I think it was for a graduate program that I was interviewing some of them, and in the group discussion I asked, just debate on what is law of large numbers. I should have recorded it. Right. So somebody said, law of large numbers is you just can't fool around with nature. Someday it will catch up. So if your sins go larger than a certain threshold, God is watching. So that kind of explanation. But law of large numbers, simply put, and
So they from law of large numbers, they went all the way to the Lord?
yes, it was really a tangential discussion, as we call it in India. It was absolutely off tangent. But anyway, law of large numbers, what it means is, again, I'm trying to cover too many things. If you are not following, interrupt me. But I really want first to talk very briefly about law of large numbers. And as I continue speaking, I want you guys to think about how does it work, and I have to give you a clue. It works for life insurance companies, life and health insurance companies, but law of large numbers can actually go against, let's say, a home insurance company. right? Which is insuring your houses. Right? So that's the clue. And what is law of large numbers? Very simply put, what it means is, if you repeat the experiment more often, you are likely to come closer to the sample mean, right? Was it simple enough?
It's right behind you in the board we are trying to express all that.
Yes, yes. So I hope students of your caliber, I need not explain further, but still, what it means is, when you think that for a certain outcome, whether you should keep 5 rupees aside, $5 aside, or $500 aside, it is more likely to come true if your sample size is homogeneous, right? You would know some things about a population. Everyone with me? Okay. So I probably leave it at that. I want you guys to think about, and as I said, it works for life insurance companies, and it could go against home insurance companies, right? So that's very briefly about reinsurance and, let's say, the other higher levels, and ultimately it could end up with a sovereign government. The losses could be so large that none of these commercial entities are able to pay, and government pays. It has happened. It continuously happens in some of the less developed economies. Please.
Does it work for life insurance companies? Because we're all going to die anyway, so there's no guarantee that your house is going to be destroyed.
Very, very thoughtful, but still not the right answer. But much better than what I experienced at IIT Mumbai. Okay, but any question on reinsurance? Why it exists? So the primary reason for a reinsurance comes from the next time.
Quick question, do all insurance companies have reinsurance, like what all the big ones do, or does all the insurance companies, no matter how big they are?
Okay, good question. I cannot give an accurate answer because there's something called self-retention also, that we also do. So let's say if you have a car worth, let's say $1 million, right? But you know that you won't damage it so badly that you kind of need to buy a cover worth $1 million. Or even if there's a small damage to your car, you can afford to get the painting job yourself, right? So you would not buy. And same applies for an insurance company as well. Same applies for a reinsurance company as well when they're going for, let's say, retrocession. They themselves can retain something. So that is definitely a part which is self-insured. We can't say that it's not insured, but self-insured, right? Plus, they could be so diversified that for a given line of business, they might not buy reinsurance cover, right? So I'm not in a position to very accurately answer your question that what percentage it is done and what percentage it is not. It could be a very much a business decision depending upon how much is your reinsurance budget. It's exactly like the way you do your financial planning. Right? So same works for an insurance company as well as a reinsurance company. But reinsurance is a very well-established practice and mechanism of risk management that has existed in its full form, I would say, for at least 120 years. Origins of the first reinsurance company, which I think is Hamburg Re, which doesn't exist anymore, or probably it was Cologne Re. Origins of reinsurance is actually in Europe. Swiss Re, Munich Re, Hanover Re, SCOR, most of them are Europe-based companies. They originated in Europe. And Swiss Re, or formation of Swiss Re was from a big fire in a place called Glarus in Switzerland. The losses of the insurance companies were so large that most of them went bankrupt, and that's where they felt the need of a reinsurance company. Right? So the Lloyd's Syndicate works as an insurance company of very, very specialized risk, as well as they work as reinsurer as well. Right? So I hope that at least partially answers your question. So these are the fundamental reasons. Please.
So on your slide it says it helps to manage people's risks, and we were talking yesterday with a professor about vulnerability and how that factors into risk, and that the indexes for figuring out vulnerability are kind of it's hard to get us.
Yes. Yes, you're three slides ahead of the class.
Oh, okay, that's very
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
And that's why precisely you need a CAT model. I thought I have to build a case, why do you need a CAT model? Why did I survive 10 years in the company doing the same thing? But you already asked the right question. Yeah, the price of growing up in an organization is being casually dressed versus dressed like this, because the moment I go back to office, I'm actually attending another meeting where we are talking about what are the future risks. So climate change was a future risk 20-25 years back. It's present now. So what we as an organization especially constantly do is think about what are the future risks, right? We were one of the first companies to talk about, think about, and do something about climate change, when others were just grappling with the fact that climate, is it really changing? It was a very scientific discussion that is climate really changing, right? How many of you think climate change is bad? Absolute consensus, right? You're not convinced. It's bad. Has anyone, I'm sure you guys search internet for a lot of things, but while searching the internet, did you ever come across good examples of climate change? Yes, I'm sure. One example, what have you read? Please.
The Aero Sea drying up.
Say again, please.
The Aero Sea drying up.
Yes. I've not read about it, but I understand. Yeah. So we all know the east coast of US get pounded by at least on an average 7 or 8 cyclones, or they are not called cyclones, tropical storms in that region, right? So we know that the origin of these cyclones is in the ocean. If the ocean water is warmer than 26 degrees, then you have cloud formation, and ultimately you have very strong winds and cyclones along with that, and possibly heavy precipitation as well, right? We all know that. But there are a lot of research going on which says because of climate change, the cyclones would become less frequent and they would become less stronger, right? Has anybody read about it? So they say, yeah, because of deforestation in Sahara or in the sub-Saharan region, so there's a lot of sand, right? And there's sandstorms. These sandstorms do not allow the cyclones that are formed in the Atlantic Ocean to gather its strength, right? That's also research going on. Somebody's trying to find some good things about climate change. Please, you wanted to, you wanted to share something or one example?
No, I was just beautifully raising my hand. Yes, I've heard those things.
Yes. Plus, I think many people are talking that because of climate change, we all know it's causing global warming. The polar ice is melting, ice cap is melting, so that means more cooler water is flowing into the oceans, and for our oceans to achieve 26 degree, the threshold at which cyclones are formed or which evaporation gets accentuated, it will not happen, right? So there are a lot of research going in that direction as well. But Swiss Re very strongly believes net, climate change is bad. It is causing irreparable damage to the environment and ultimately to the society. I would have loved to make a presentation on climate change, but that's very theoretical. I will restrict myself to how we see it as an opportunity, how we are commercially utilizing it, and at times doing it for the betterment of the society as well.
So one example of this year in Boston we had a very harsh winter.
Okay.
So in terms of the total amount of snow coming in because of some of the reasons that you mentioned or you discussed, that actually we might still see the cold extreme events that happen. We might still see a lot of snow. They might be fairly intense when they do happen. But of course, because of climate change, we expect to see less number of years which are that intense and that cold. So, and climate change is a lot of that happens in the high altitudes, less in the lower. So that's what. Hurricanes, there's a lot of uncertainty that you were saying.
Yes.
Yes, frequency, actually some people have indeed said that frequency might decrease. There is not enough consensus on that. What people seem to have started to agree on that the more intense hurricanes, not all hurricanes, the more intense hurricanes may grow even more intense in an average sense.
Yeah.
So those are the most destructive ones.
Right. So I think, again, there's no consensus, but still the direction that research is taking, at this point of time is that, especially talking about North Atlantic and the east coast of US, that the severe storms are getting more severe. Only to that level there's some consensus, rest all is at this point of time debate. One good example of climate change I wanted to share from India, and it incorporates the whole image and a lot of other things that we associate with India. A bit of slowness, bureaucracy. So there was a dam that was being built in one of the southern states in the southern region of India. It was heavily delayed, and the reason for which the dam was built, that to store water, there was actually no water by the time the dam was ready. But then climate change struck, right? So there was a massive disturbance or alteration in the precipitation, let's say actual precipitation. And ultimately, now that dam is overflowing and it's really fulfilling its need. But that's not something we planned for, it just happened. Right? So again, reinsurers are also, from a very climate change, hazard and vulnerability perspective, it does work in the interest of the overall financial services industry as well. So we would consider ourselves in the financial services industry. So in India we call it BFSI, banking, financial services and insurance. And reinsurance also, you can think, belongs to the same industry. We have a bit of a silo when reinsurers work like reinsurers, which is actually good. We have learned our lessons in 2007, 2008, when we also thought that we have a lot of money to spare and we can put it in some exotic investments, hedge funds, and even probably don't exist anymore, those derivatives. That we also had our share of losses. That was the first time your best investor and best manager, Mr. Buffett, also invested in our company. It was such bad times that he had to put in money in our company. But we sailed through that only because we remained as reinsurer. We understand what's our job. We are reinsurer. Yes, we have a lot of money. We do invest a lot, but again, it's always in very solid investments, gold-plated investments only. We are not bothered about returns, but rather the ability to pay back, not just to an individual, but to a large portion of the economy, because we are talking about large losses, and that's where a reinsurer comes into picture. Since we are talking about large losses, they are typically from natural events, right, what you rightly pointed. We have seen the World Trade Center losses. And that was probably the biggest man-made disaster, and even the biggest man-made insured and reinsured loss as well. Otherwise, we do not have a similar example, a second example, anywhere in the world. So most often these losses that these insurance companies are bothered about are catastrophic losses, and these catastrophe losses mostly come from natural reasons, be it earthquakes, cyclones, or any kind of weather-related events. You call it typhoon in some parts of the world, you call them cyclones, you call them storms in some part of the world. Then you have tornadoes, very, very prominent in the US. Do you know which country witnesses the most number of tornadoes? Guess. Take a wild guess.
The US.
US, it's a large territory, so if you count all the tornadoes in that country in a given season, still it's the highest. But if you go by, let's say, density, let's say size versus the number of tornadoes, you'll be surprised to know that it's Bangladesh. Bangladesh also experiences a lot of tornadoes, but we don't hear about it. Why? It's loss of life, right? We don't care. We all care for our homes, insured homes, insurance company paying for it. And I also represent that commercial angle of it. So not just I encourage you to end up working for Swiss Re, but I hope you at some point of time think about something else as well. It could be sustainability, it could be climate change, you might want to work for Greenpeace, right? But be aware of these things and let's not be bound by what we only get to know, right? So I think, please.
I was going to ask, and now seems like an appropriate time, what fields does Swiss Re hire from? Like what, obviously you probably want finance people and business people, but you said there's scientific.
You are 4 slides ahead of us.
Okay.
So again, just one last minute on this slide. Any question? So the basic reasons of a reinsurance company to exist is, I'll just complete the slide. So first of all, help insurance company manage their risk, because typically they do not take a portfolio look, they always look at individual risk. And since we are insuring or reinsuring a portfolio, we take a slightly more holistic look, and we advise the insurance companies as well in terms of risk management. And the obvious transfer of risk, that's the reason, and that helps them with their results, right? So that gives them more capacity to write. They can actually write a lot more insurance if they reinsure a part of it. And finally, as I said, we are one of the biggest investors in the capital markets as well. You would have heard of, and that's very, very common in the US, called cat bonds. That's where the world of reinsurance and capital market meets. A portfolio can be securitized and placed as a catastrophe bond, which pays a good coupon rate, much higher than most of the other investments. Why? Because there's a large risk. They are most often rated as junk bonds, so very, very high return, and the risk is so much high that you might even lose your principal. But so far, these cat bonds have resulted in very good performance, not only in the US and in Europe as well. So that's my last slide on reinsurance, please.
So my question was, I think, following up on one of you asked, I think, Alison. As an analogy, the way insurance companies treat individual insurers, reinsurance would treat the insurance companies to some extent. As you said, the analogy is not perfect. Now, so reinsurance then deals with, and as you're saying, deals with the more catastrophic of the hazards, if you will, if that's the right way of saying it. Given that, is there a difference in the investment strategies of insurance companies versus reinsurance companies?
Well, I think that's a very good question, because we have a lot of responsibility, not just to the industry that we belong, but even to the stock market and the overall economy. And a lot that we do is linked, right? So one is obviously the investment portion. So our view, or typically a reinsurer's view of the money that they are investing or the reserves that they maintain is more conservative. So the investment strategy of a reinsurance company, by the nature of the business itself, is more conservative than with an insurance company. And again, it depends market to market as well. Right now, most of the Indian companies are making profit only because of their investment income. Right? So I actually did not work last 11 years for Swiss Re. I worked for GE. GE also had an insurance company, if you remember. It was called GE Insurance Solutions. It used to work under various names, and later on, before selling it off, they consolidated it under the brand name of GE Insurance Solutions, but it existed as a company called ERC. Employers Reinsurance Corporation. I don't know how many of you would have heard. They had another company called IRI, which was more into large commercial risk. So I had worked a substantial number of years, or half of my working experience is actually with GE, a truly an American company, and that's what I consider as the company where I was born. Most of my kind of way of thinking, or the way I have kind of embraced the corporate culture is what GE propagates. And why do I mention this? Because GE Insurance Solutions, or GE's reason to be in reinsurance business, was again to earn a lot of money, earn a lot of premium, right? Do you guys follow the corporate strategy, or do you read about corporate strategies of various companies? So GE that way is an excellent company, very well diversified. They have certain cash cows, they have star performers. Have you guys heard of the BCG matrix? Too much of management stuff. Don't worry. Those things are easy to learn. So GE had this idea that there should be certain companies which bring in money, and there would be certain other business where they need to deploy that money. So GE is a pioneer in many industries. Either they are number one, number two, or they don't exist in that business. Insurance was the only company where they were number 6, but still continued to be in that business, right? Only because it brings you a lot of cash. That was GE's reason. Again, nothing wrong, nothing right with that. But Swiss Re is a traditional, old school reinsurance company. 2007, 2008, we were a little bit wayward. We had a CEO. He was a real darling. He was performing exceptionally well, right? Because he was a banker, a French banker. And after that, rest all you know. So we had to ask Mr. Buffett to help us out. But again, if his bet had gone gone through, we probably would have been a very different company. But we realized we are good at reinsurance, and we decided to stay with reinsurance only.
Was the CEO fired?
Yes.
He went on a summer vacation. He actually, immediately after that, he came to India on his private jet, and what is it called? Heli ski?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm sure he got a hefty package also to be made redundant. But yes, what we realized that we are a reinsurance company, we have a lot more responsibility to the market, to the country, to the economy, wherever we are operating. And I think, in a way, Swiss Re is too big to fail. So we decided that we should stick to what we know best, what we have done best in the last 148 years or 47 years at that point of time. So we hired, or rather we promoted somebody by the name Stefan Lippe, who's a mathematician, who's an actuary, and absolutely solid, no aggression, and he wanted reinsurance company to remain as a reinsurance company, not become an investment bank. So much so that his name was, Devashish, if you could help me. Anyway, he was a banker, his background was banking. He actually thought, if it makes sense, we would not be in Switzerland anymore, but move to London. Right. Anyway, too much about Swiss Re, but I hope I've put forward the case rightly enough about reinsurance. Within that, what is the importance of catastrophe or big losses, and within that, natural tornadoes, right? That's what we call as the weather-related natural catastrophes, and even floods, because they are more related to weather. And then separately, the blue bars are the earthquakes and tsunami, right? All of you know how tsunamis are formed, right? It's most often, and that's not the only cause of tsunamis, most often they're caused by subsea earthquakes, and that to a particular kind of earthquake, wherein one of the plate goes down below the other plate, there's a displacement, and that whole mass of water tries to convert that energy because of displacement, obviously towards the shore. You would have the sea waves rising to great height and going far inland and then causing flooding. So that's basically how tsunamis are formed, but they could be formed from other sources also. Let me ask, what do you think would be the other sources of tsunami? What could be the other possible sources of tsunami? Tsunami actually is an outcome, right? Sorry.
Meteorite?
Absolutely, yes. And not in recent history, but we have had tsunamis because of meteorites. Yes. And even volcanic eruption on the bed of sea could actually cause tsunamis. Right? And just to let you know, meteorites are the worst kind of risk that we actually price for in Swiss Re. So not anymore, because I think Devashish also went through that case study. So when we hire people, and specifically for our catastrophe perils team, so we ask students to solve or work on a case study wherein we ask them to estimate the losses that could happen to a country or to an economy from a meteorite hit. Right? So you can work on it, and if you don't find a good solution, you can always ask Devashish. But the proof is he got it right, that's why he had a job with us.
I was going to ask that question.
Yes. So again, clearly you can see that the losses, these are index losses. Don't think that we are showing different numbers. Let's say a loss in 2012 would obviously be sounding like 20 billion and something in so these are all trended losses, trended at the rates of 2012 prices. So clearly, even the insurance losses, insured losses are rising. But let's quickly debate or think about why they are rising. Any guesses? One simple guess would be more people are buying insurance, that's why there's more insured losses. True. Insurance penetration is on the rise. So the most beautiful parts of the world are actually the most dangerous one. Florida is a good example, right? All of you want a summer home in Florida. Right? None? Okay. Maybe in California. California, yes. Always sunny. Right? But California has the highest of earthquake risk. Right? Not just earthquakes, there's something called fire falling, which is very prevalent in your country, where in the sprinklers. So what happens is, earthquake itself can cause fire because there's a lot of gas pipes and other things, or electrical circuits. That is also a known cause of big losses. So there are actually insurance cover not only from the shaking, the damage that can be caused, even from the fire that follows an earthquake. So it's called fire following an earthquake. There's a large number of losses coming from there. And the sprinkler systems, most often they would go or they would be triggered with a mild shaking as well, or they could be damaged. And there's a lot of losses. There might not be any structural damage to your building because of an earthquake, but the contents of your house is severely damaged because of the sprinklers leaking. So these are the three very common sources of losses, especially in a developed economy like US. Even in Japan, we see a lot of losses coming from sprinkler leakage and the fire that follows an earthquake. There might not be any structural damage because there's a lot of advancement that is happening in terms of how you build your structures. So in Japan, probably they're building structures which are sitting on huge ball bearings, so they can move in either direction, right? And they hope that they can withstand, or otherwise also a lot of changes are happening in design code that helps us build better structure and have less losses. But still the losses are on the rise. So one is obviously the insurance penetration is increasing. What else is the reason? Second is obviously I talked about we are building houses where we ideally should not be building, right? So the concentration of values or property or risk in heavily exposed, NatCat exposed region is absolutely on the rise. And with the globalization of the economies, interlinking of the economies, that's even happening at a much, much faster pace, right? Most of the civilizations, they have their origin close to a river, but they have propagated because of a river. And they are the most proximate cause of flooding, right? Flooding is one of the biggest but underestimated loss or threat to the world, right? Even Europe suffers a lot of flooding losses. India, Indonesia, Malaysia also suffers flooding losses. Even Australia has a lot of flooding losses. US I need not talk about, and maybe because of the cyclones or the storm surge that happens, even US has seen a lot of flooding losses. And then even with Sandy, we saw a lot of flooding losses, right?
So just to give you an idea, we had in our recommended reading list, PNAS, Proceedings and National Academy of Sciences, which is one of the top journals, paper on why the Indus Valley civilization disappeared. People did not understand that the exact causes for a long time. There are all kinds of theories. But this paper attributes a lot of that to climate change. Natural reasons for climate change at the time in that part of the world, and a lot of it related to floods and rainforest streams and floods. So that's prehistory India. Current US, Iowa had its third 100-year event in the last 17 years or so. So these are probabilistic, yes. 100-year event, you expect, what is the chance of a 100-year event happening in any given year? 100. Happening thrice within 17 years, and I think by now it's more, if you correct me. That's indicative of something changing. So if you're tossing a coin, you get about 6 heads, 4 tails, and so on. That's one thing. If you continue to get 9 heads, you would start to suspect that the coin might be biased. That's what's going on.
I realize I'm not doing very good on time. So again, one of the big reasons is actually climate change as well. So what do we understand by climate change, or what do we refer to as climate change? Because we know that climate itself is variable, right? But when we say climate change, what we are referring to is because of human activities, the irreparable damage that we have caused to the weather, right? Or to the climate which is much more long term, right? So we know that sea levels are rising, we know that the global average temperatures have risen, and I think the precipitation pattern has changed, and all we attribute to human activities, be it because of deforestation, because of bad land usage, and many other reasons, and a lot of industrial gases as well can contribute to that. Thank you. So yeah, this is the slide that covers. Now, what we are trying to say is, one, the losses are on the rise, right? But to predict that loss, again, this is a very commercial angle. Ultimately, we are in this business to make money, right? Why do you buy an insurance cover? Because you want to sleep easy. That in case your car is damaged, somebody else pays for kind of bringing it back to the original shape, usable shape. And that's how you buy the insurance as well. And that is the price that you pay for. But what is a good price or accurate price for a reinsurance cover, which is mostly cat exposed? To do that, I think in the last 20, 25 years, all over the world, we have been using something called catastrophe model. And Swiss Re is a pioneer in building catastrophe model. And we think they work on a 4-box principle, or we build our catastrophe models on 4-box principle. Imagine these 4 boxes containing various information and all of it coming together to produce a loss. Or to tell you that if this is your portfolio, if it is used for residential purposes, and if it is built of wood, and if it is in California, this is the possible loss you can have. And then on top of that, you superimpose the policy information. So you would have purchased an insurance policy which has a deductible, which has a limit, and within that you get paid, right? So these are the 4 boxes. First box is called natural hazard. This contains information about the hazard, be it earthquake, or you see the example of the Hurricane Charlie in 2004. So that box will contain all the phenomenon related information. What is the pressure, what is the wind speed, in which direction it would curve. Those kind of information are stored in that box. That box actually simulates, or it's fundamentally based on simulation, because if you look at last 100 years of history, the recorded cyclones would not be more than 100 multiplied by maybe 7 or 10, right? But these models run a simulation worth 10,000 years. So it can actually go back to the history up to 10,000 years. But how do you do that? So you take the mother events, the events that has happened, you use various simulation techniques. Monte Carlo is the most commonly used simulation technique to come up with more events. So you change some of the parameters of the cyclone and you produce more cyclones. But again, you do a lot of reality checks to make sure that in reality those kind of cyclones can actually happen in that region. So that's the box about natural hazard. Similarly for earthquake, similarly for flood, it will contain information. Then is the box about vulnerability. This is actually the most difficult box, and I think it would answer some of the questions that you were asking. This box contains information that if a building experiences an earthquake of, let's say, 6.5 magnitude, but magnitude is less important, what is more important is intensity. I hope you all understand the difference between the magnitude of an earthquake and intensity. Magnitude is the actual power of that earthquake, how much energy was released. Intensity is what you felt, right? So depending upon where the earthquake was, how deep it was, I felt it like this, that this was shaking. Somebody else in some other region which is much closer to the fault line or to the source of the earthquake would say that my house is absolutely damaged. I just cannot live in that house, right? Now, that kind of information is stored in this box called vulnerability. The end output of this box is a curve which is typically looks like an S-shaped curve. S-shaped curve. So what you are plotting is intensity versus damage. Typically, the damage would be less as you begin, then it peaks up and it plateaus, and that's why it's called an S-curve, or it looks like an S-curve, right? Easy to understand. Depending upon the construction material, depending upon the resistance it offers to the given phenomenon, in this case, let's say we are talking about earthquakes, right? That's how you will have this curve, right? Up to a certain intensity, you would have no losses. Then beyond a certain intensity, your losses would exponentially increase. And then once you have a complete damage, total damage, even if the intensity doubles, it doesn't matter. Total damage is total damage. So that is the information stored in this box.
Just quickly, you guys, what I've heard is in civil engineers, hazards, people talking about fragility curves. And they are the same, or they are related. If you could just quickly explain.
They are nearly same. It's probably refinement, because now in CAT models and even for buying insurance, I think more and more you have to disclose that not just it is built of, let's say, reinforced concrete, but if you have done any retrofitting, if there's any other structure that is kind of associated to this, any other, let's say, civil work you have done. So those kind of refinements. Right? So that's about the box which contains information about vulnerability. Then is the box called, we call it the value distribution box. in this box contains all the geographical information. Basically, where on earth is your risk? That is the information is contained in this box. And then finally, you have a box for insurance condition, because as I said, ultimately we are an insurance company or reinsurance company. We want to know, given that a building has suffered X percentage of damage, what it means to that policy, right? To the policy holder, because you would have a deductible and a limit. So let's, just to keep it simple, I am showing deductible and limits only. Limit means up to that amount only the insurance company will pay. Deductible means that is the first dollar loss, or up to that you will pay. And let's think about, why do we even have deductibles? In insurance, why insurance companies, whatever policy you buy, insurance company will insist that there will be a deductible. That means that if there is a loss, right, you bear the first dollar of that loss. Why do you think there is a clause or a mechanism like this?
You might not want to claim something that's really small, because you just have to pay for it, so.
Yes. Not just that, not just it reduces the administrative purposes of a claim, but even something more important, what we call as the moral hazard, right? So even if you damage your car knowingly, you at least pay some portion of it, right? Otherwise, think of it. If it was absolutely free, whatever be the reason of loss, whatever be the cause of the loss, and if the insurance company gives you an unlimited pay, that means whatever size of the loss they will pay, and even the first dollar they will pay, I probably will have a tendency to damage my house every now and then, right? So that I can claim for the repair cost. So that's the primary reason to have a deductible, and it works in reinsurance as well. Not the first dollar loss to the portfolio is paid by the reinsurer. The insurance company has to retain certain portion, and the limit of liability is always limited. There is a capping, right? You can't claim unlimited, or a reinsurance company, an insurance company will not pay you an unlimited claim, right? So that's the 4 boxes of a CAT model. Yeah, that's fine. That probably answers some of your question, and I can talk about what kind of people we hire. If we take your question first.
For the natural hazards, so you're modeling, right, particular to a region. What size region are you modeling? Is it really for like a town, community, a state? Like how big is the region? And you have to do, I know for the climate modeling and stuff, there's the global climate modeling, and then there's downscaling that has to be done. So what?
Right.
What's the
So
size?
what you are asking, I'll answer it in 2 ways. One is about what do you use it for? So your portfolio could be size of a city. Portfolio could be actually one risk, one large risk that you can actually model within a CAT model, or your portfolio could be a well-diversified homeowners portfolio all over the US, right? Each one of them is possible as far as the usage is concerned. Now, while you build a model, the granularity of the model is severely constrained by the data. Whatever be the granularity of the available data, because we are reinsurance companies, we do not invest in fundamental research, we do not go and predict earthquakes, and neither do we have any localized data. I think one company in the US called Sanborn, they have data up to even better than street level. So they can differentiate between the 13th floor and the 26th floor. It is important, maybe for flooding. Well, 13th and 26th doesn't matter, but the 3rd floor versus the ground floor versus the basement really matters. So again, it is constrained by data only.
So, based on the value distribution box principle, do NatCat, like reinsurance companies or even insurance companies, do they seek out policies to offer to certain places based on high return and low risk?
Do you aspire to do an MBA at some point of time? Yes. So we do hire MBAs as well, but more importantly, if they have a fundamental education in some of these sciences. But again, on a serious note, yes, that's how reinsurers make money, right? If it is a well-diversified portfolio, yes, I do write for a right price in a very risky place and elsewhere also. So if and again, the value that a reinsurer brings is they are truly global. They might have originated in the Europe, or some of them are US based also, but the way they work is they're truly global. They are more often making money because they would have a large US portfolio and a Japanese portfolio as well. Extremely unlikely that both the portfolios gives you a large loss. Right? That's how reinsurers, because of diversification, make money.
So is NatCat specifically like would you say it's one of the easier areas to project with all the modeling and all that? No, it's not.
It's the toughest, and that's why we make a lot of money in that business, right? Because what you are paying for is the uncertainty, right? Otherwise, who knows? If I had known that my portfolio would suffer a loss of X%, right? I would precisely buy that much and think that if I pay a premium, and then we have a concept of payback. So that means if I as a reinsurer pay for a loss, so let's say I've paid for a loss of $100. Now I'll always think about in how many years do I recover that, right? Because you would be paying me an annual premium only, maybe a $10 premium, right? So I would have another 10 years, and I have to ensure that somehow you stick with me, not go to the other reinsurer, so that I can recover my money. Right? But catastrophe business is the toughest business in terms of predicting it, because it cannot be based on the past. Most of the insurance pricing, be it life insurance, health insurance, is based on past data. But catastrophe business or catastrophe risk has to be on the exposure itself. What are you sitting on versus what you have experienced in the past, right? If you have a healthy history, right, healthy life history, your insurance, life insurance premium would be less. That does not hold true in case of, let's take the example of Florida. You might have built a new house in Florida, and then last 10 years or whenever it was built, it didn't suffer any loss. But just because you are in Florida, you are sitting on a big risk. So it is more of the exposure what matters rather than the experience that you have had. You might have had absolutely no losses in the 10 years, last 10 years, but that's no guarantee that you will not have a loss in the future. Right? So that's the difference. Now quickly talking about what kind of people we hire, what kind of specialties we look for. I am trying to cover this slide more as the 4 boxes, and these are some of the specialties that are required to work on these boxes. All of it comes together to form a CAT model and ultimately give you a loss frequency curve, as we call it. That means at a certain frequency, certain regularity, what will be the losses that you suffer. So the output of a CAT model is a frequency curve. Now, for the natural hazard, as you can understand, we would hire or we would need a lot of expertise with the fundamental, the phenomenon itself, right? Earthquake engineers, wind engineers, hydrologists who study these things, right? Or who understand the phenomenon and how it manifests. Then for vulnerability, obviously the civil engineers, structural engineers who design these structures, who understand the design codes, they understand how these structures will behave under certain stress conditions, right? So that's the expertise that is required to build the vulnerability box. Distribution, as I said, that's essentially about where on earth is your risk, right? So that's more about geoinformatics, a lot of remote sensing kind of work, or expertise with those softwares is extremely useful to work on that box. Finally, insurance condition, that's about the maths or the economics behind it. So we do hire a lot of people with background in mathematics, statistics, or even in natural sciences. So it's a multidisciplinary field. Given that these catastrophe covers, the insurance covers that these companies buy, they are fairly complex, and you need a multidisciplinary approach to solve this problem, to come up with a possible premium. But again, data is the key. By data, I mean not just the data that you use to build the model, but even to feed to the model to produce results. These models, and I think every model works on a very simple principle called GIGO principle. I'm sure all of you know about GIGO.
We've talked about this.
Yeah, I think last time. Garbage in, garbage out. So as good, as granular is your data that goes into the model, that's how good your ultimate output would be, or believable your output would be. I think one last statement, so this is what most of my seniors in my company have taught me. Like, all models are wrong. You should know what is the limitation of the model. Ultimately, model is a model. It is a representation of a certain section of the population. It is not the whole population. If we were representing something with the whole population, why do we even need a model, right? So models have their limitations. You as a user of the model should know what are those limitations, what are the boundaries beyond which it will either not perform or will perform suboptimally, right? So you should know what are the deficiencies of your model. So a good saying that we use in our company for most of our underwriters is, a fool with a tool is still a fool.
Can I just ask one final question? So, at the start of the presentation, you said, are there any positive benefits to climate change? And so one I can obviously think of is that the northern sort of sea route is gonna be not frozen forever. And we have sort of oil companies and energy companies that, like, as the price of oil goes over $100 a barrel, like, they're gonna be increasingly profitable. Do you see, and it seems like there's incentives for those companies to sort of forward climate change. Is there a role in the insurance or reinsurance side to try to mitigate some of those incentives because the losses will be so large? Right, you said that ultimately it seems like a net bad,
Yes.
right? So do you feel like there's pressure in the financial market coming from the insurance side to say, try to, like, could it offset potentially some of the profits as these sort of larger oil companies?
Sure. So I think first I have to say that I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, but still I'll try. We usually have a bad image about pharma companies, oil companies, overall energy companies. We think that somehow they're making way more money than what they are kind of putting in as the cost of goods produced and making huge profits. What I essentially want to say is, one, climate change is real, right? Whichever way you look at it, be it the commercial angle of it or in the larger context of movement of people, food security, shift of power, political environment, whichever way you look at it, it's real, it's happening, it's continuously happening. Some companies at this point of time, or some industries at this point of time, obviously are making more money out of it, so they would probably be talking louder about it, but I don't think anyone is lying, right? So there was a lot of controversy about a Nobel laureate. Is he a Nobel laureate? Pachauri? He didn't, right? With Al Gore? No, I think with Al Gore he got it.
He's the chairman of the
Terry and
the intergovernmental
yes,
panel which
I
got the Nobel Laureate.
yes. So I
Nobel
think,
Prize.
yes. So he also had to face a lot of criticism because again everybody would tend to think, what is your vested interest in taking up any topic, right? So I'll at this point of time leave it at that and probably focus more on